We are so back. Welcome back to another All-22 film review. At this point, the draft is over, and we are going to be looking into this next year's NFL season. And today we are talking about a guy that I feel very confidently is going to be proving a lot of people wrong, and he's going to force a lot of people to eat their words about him. That guy is Jaguars defensive end Travon Walker. I think that a lot of the narratives surrounding his name have been very lazy, and I think that he has a very large chance to be a breakout candidate. So without further ado, let's jump into it.
Before we get into the tape, I kind of want to break down the Travon Walker lore, if you will. He was someone that was a major riser in last year's draft process. This is from a mock draft taken right around 3 weeks before the draft, and this is kind of in the middle of his rise. We saw him mocked in the 20 or 30 range right after the Super Bowl as that offseason was kind of kicking off, but he just saw major strides continue to hit his draft stock until basically right before day one of the draft, he ended up being announced as the #1 overall pick. And the biggest reason for him being such a riser is because he had one of the greatest combine performances of all time. You see 6'5", 272, and putting up elite numbers in every single category. This gives teams lots of flexibility, and he had one of the highest ceilings we had ever seen. And right as that process was happening, it felt like every single major personality and every network absolutely hated this decision. They took every opportunity they could to just dunk on this pick. You could find very little positivity about Travon Walker being the #1 overall pick. Combine this with the fact that Walker had basically no production his entire rookie season. This sort of negativity around his name never really got better. 3.5 sacks, only 50 tackles. Every single time his name was brought up, it felt like it was in a negative sense. But this quote by Jags GM Trent Baalke is kind of the whole point of my video, is that once you turn on the tape, there's a lot more that Travon Walker brings to the table. The stat when it comes to sacks is very overvalued. There's a lot of ways to influence the game, and you saw Travon do that. The versatility that comes with Travon Walker is really awesome. He's great in pass coverage, which makes it really easy for him to be a 3-down player. Right here, he's lined up on the right side of the line, and this H-back right here is going to push out and run a little curl flat, and you're going to see Travon Walker get back into his zone, and then when Herbert targets him, you see Walker make a diving forced incompletion. On this play right here, Walker's going to be pushing this outside edge, and when the Commanders take the snap, it's going to be a play-action pass, and this running back is coming towards the left sideline to take a screen. But Walker's going to notice this, and you're going to see him plant that outside foot into the ground, and then he's going to end up jumping this pass. It's a very athletic play, but what I am more concerned about is with someone who has very little football experience, right? He didn't get a ton of snaps in college, and at this point, this was his first ever NFL game. That shows really awesome reaction time, and that's something that I really think we should be looking forward to with him. And even though he didn't put up incredible numbers from a pass rushing perspective, there were a lot of times where I was really impressed with the flashes that he was showing, just like this play right here. He's going to be lined up on the left side of your screen, coming off the wide 9 stance, and he is initially going to get caught up on this chip block right here, but initially disengages. And then at 270 pounds, he has both the speed and the bend to completely evade this left tackle, right? You're going to see this left shoulder dip under his hands. The tackle completely whiffs on Walker. He's a free shot on Tannehill at this point. Strip sack, fumble, Jags get the ball. This play is another good example of that. He's pushing off the wide 9 on the right side of the field this time. And when 76 is trying to meet his base with his hands, you're just going to see Walker chop at it, dip that right shoulder, comes around, gets the sack on Wentz. And plays like these are where I really understand what made him the #1 overall pick, because when you have this much athleticism and versatility at 270 pounds, it offers so many options that you can do on the defensive line. He can play on the interior, rush from the edge, play pass coverage, play all 3 downs, and he has such a high ceiling as a player because you just don't see players who are that big and move that fast. There were a lot of times where I felt like Walker was doing a great job on a rep and he didn't end up getting a pressure or a sack out of it for whatever reason, and plays like this are a great example of what I mean by that. He's going to be converting speed to power on the outside here, and he makes great contact on the chest of this offensive tackle, and you're going to see the tackle's weight sort of shift from the balls of his feet more towards his heels. That's a great indicator that Walker's generating a lot of pushback here. And right now the tackle's base is parallel to Wentz. That's exactly where you want to be as a blocker. Walker's going to kind of flatten him out. You see his butt shift more towards the end zone as opposed to the quarterback. And if Wentz holds this ball for another half a second, Walker is there to bring him to the ground, but he gets the ball out super quickly that even though Walker had this great of a rep, it didn't result in anything. On this play, it's the exact same thing. Walker is rushing from the outside. You're going to see the offensive lineman try to set him with his hands. Walker's going to dip that shoulder inside. He catches his hands, throws him aside and has the bend to get there, but Wentz gets it out super quickly. And as a result of how quickly he's getting it out, he spikes it off the helmet of this offensive lineman, and it's an incomplete pass. The other thing from this article that really stood out to me from what the coaches and executives had to say about Travon Walker is this Doug Peterson quote where he says, teams are aware of him and scheming protection towards him. He's gaining recognition and respect of opponents, but he needs to understand that he can't get frustrated. At first, I was kind of confused as to what kind of schematic protection teams are doing against Walker. And then I threw on the tape and it became pretty obvious to me. Walker is still someone who is very new to the position and to the game of football in general. And what that means is that he does not have a great ability to sort of read and react to plays right now. And one thing that really screws him up is the play action. And that was shown time and time again. He's lined up at the wide 9 right here. Justin Herbert is going to be taking the snap. And obviously this is play action, but Herbert is dropping back, looking like he's going to hand it off. And you see Walker fly off the edge at first, but stop completely in his tracks all the way until he decides it's a fake handoff. And then he rushes up on this tackle, gets a lot of pushback and gets in Herbert's face. But imagine how fast he could have got there if this step right here didn't happen and he pushed a little bit more aggressively on the play action. The exact same thing happens just a couple plays later where the Chargers are coming to the line really quickly. It's going to be a play action run to the outside. Walker is setting the edge here. He's taking away the C gap in order for the running back to cut back to the inside if it is a run, but obviously it's a play action. And then when Walker realizes it, that's when he starts getting his hands moving, right? You see his hand rip through, break the arms of that offensive tackle, and Herbert's just going to take a slight step up in the pocket, and he's able to get a throw off. But if Walker doesn't have to spend this time setting the edge on the play action, he probably doesn't need as much bend to get to where he did, right? Because Herbert was able to step up, avoid the hit, and end up getting the throw off. If Walker has a little bit better timing and reaction to this play, he doesn't have to take as steep of an angle. He can get his hands moving earlier and probably gets a hit on Herbert. Here it is in the Commanders game. Wentz is going to take the snap, play action. You're going to see Walker really not move off that line until Wentz gets into his drop back. And Walker has the athleticism to generate a ton of pushback from basically a stationary position, but it's not anywhere near enough to get to Wentz, and he has an easy time getting that ball off. Walker is a very violent rusher, but if you have to take an extra half a second or full second to even diagnose a play, that is a ton of time for a quarterback to get the ball out. And I think that's a lot of the reason as to why his numbers don't fully suggest the level of his play. Here it is again, a play action. You're going to see Walker kind of set that edge to the outside. Once Wentz gets into that drop back, he's going to try to bend around the edge. He's going to rip through the arms of the tackle. But Wentz has a super easy time getting this ball off and ends up completing a pass.
The other true flaw that I have with Walker's game is his hand placement, and at this point in his career, I actually think it is quite bad. You're going to see him push from the outside right here, and he's going to try and get a left-handed punch and completely whiffs on the pads of this tackle right here, right? It's up here past his helmet, and that forces him to just kind of flail, and he's really not able to generate anything from that point just because that first punch was so bad. On this play, he's lined up as a 3 technique over this left guard, and this is going to be just a simple handoff to Derrick Henry. But you see Walker's initial hands. He basically ends up hugging this guard, and that makes it basically impossible for him to really push the guard back into the play and get into a gap. And that's exactly what happens here. The guard ends up sealing off this B gap. Derrick Henry completely springs free, and that's a play that probably could have had a lot less gain if Walker's able to actually put his hands into this guard's chest as opposed to wrapping around him and try and use him as basically like a counterweight.
So that's kind of where I'm at with Travon Walker right now. Obviously, that athletic profile is very much there. And even if the technique is a little bit sloppy right now, he's clearly getting a lot of wins based off athleticism alone. I feel pretty confident he'll be fine. It's very rare that you see 6'5", 270 pounds move with as much speed and violence as Travon Walker does, and I'm starting to understand why the Jaguars took him with the #1 overall pick. As for his weaknesses, those are things that I feel pretty good are going to come with time. His issues right now don't strike me as any kind of ill process. I don't think he has a great feel for the position. I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but he has very little experience right now. He didn't get that many snaps at Georgia, and obviously this was only his first season. He needs a little more time as a defensive end. And honestly, it makes sense that he's sloppy given all the assignments that he's been given by Jacksonville. There's not really many other guys in the league that are getting kicked out to wide 9 and then 7 techniques technique and then move to the inside and then getting pass coverage reps. Those kind of assignments make it really hard to get technically nuanced, and I can understand why there's a little bit of a setback in that category. As for the Jaguars' future, I think that this poses a very interesting question to Josh Allen and what they're going to do with him in their future. So that's kind of the next thing that I want to take a quick look at.
A couple weeks ago, Doug Peterson was asked about how he feels about the Jags pass rush this year. In this quote, he obviously says Travon Walker's there, Caleb Chason's there, Jordan Smith is coming back from injury. But this first part is really what jumped out to me. We're expecting Josh Allen to take the leap. Now, usually if you say you're expecting someone to take a leap, it's a good thing. That is not how I read this with Josh Allen. 10.5 sacks his rookie year. He finished 4th in Defensive Rookie of the Year voting. Pro Bowler that year. He had some injury stuff going on in 2020, but 7.5 and 7 sacks the next 2 years. These stats are someone from a guy that you would have already expected to have taken a jump. Now this season, Josh Allen's going to be playing on his 5th-year option, which means this is a contract year for him. If they don't decide to extend him, he's going to hit the open market. And knowing Josh Allen, he's probably going to get somewhere close to market resetting money.
If I had to guess right now, my prediction would be Travon Walker takes a pretty sizable leap this next year, and that makes the Jaguars feel confident enough that they don't need to give Allen the market that he's probably going to end up earning. And don't get me wrong, Allen deserves the type of money that he's projected to get right now. I just don't think it's very efficient if that money is coming from the Jaguars. And honestly, it makes sense. You've got Walker on rookie money that should take up at minimum the next 3 years and likely the next 4 if they pick up his 5th-year option. Are you really going to want to pay Allen that $20 million a year mark that he's probably going to earn from some other team? Me personally, I would not. And that's all I have for you guys today. Make sure you like the video, subscribe down below, hit the bell, do all of that stuff, and I will be back in the future with more film reviews. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.